File management on the iPhone isn't the best. It's definitely not as good as on a Mac, but if you know how to properly use the Files app, it's actually pretty useful. Trouble is, it's not the most intuitive app out there. So in this video, I'll show you everything that you need to know about the Files app. I'll be running this on iOS 18, by the way, because as I'm making this video in July, we're just 2 months from that being available to the public. And there's honestly almost no difference between this and iOS 17. I'll point out any differences as we go along. This is going to be quite a long video as well. I'll include chapter markers to help you navigate around if needed. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start with navigation. You have 3 view options at the bottom of the screen. On the bottom left, you have a section called Recents. Any files that you've opened or edited will show in chronological order on this page, and you can search through this list using the search box at the top. In the center at the bottom is an option called Shared. This is for files that have either been shared with you or files and folders that you've shared with other people. At the bottom right is the Browse section, which most closely represents the Finder window on your Mac. You can see that there are 3 options here. You have Locations, which we'll talk about in more detail in just a second. You have Favorites, which again we'll cover in more detail in a moment. And then you have Tags, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on. You also have an ellipsis menu in the upper right of the screen, and that's a really important menu that features throughout the Files app, so it is worth remembering that this exists. If I tap into this for just a moment, I can show you the 3 options that you have available to you on the Browse page of the Files app. You can scan a document. You would tap the button, position the document in view, make any changes that you want to the type of file at the top of the screen, like changing it from color to monochrome, for example, and then scan. Beneath that, you have the option to connect this app to a server. So for example, if you had a NAS drive, this would be the button that you would use to connect to that server. And finally, at the bottom of this menu, you have an edit button. Once you've tapped on that, if you go into Locations, you can see that we have several file locations with toggle options next to them, and that edit button has allowed me to choose to enable or disable these different file locations. You can see here on my demo iPhone, I have both iCloud Drive showing, which is where my cloud-based files will be visible, and a section called On My iPhone, which is where any files stored locally on my phone will be contained. I also have Dropbox, which, as I'm sure you know, is a third-party cloud storage provider. You're not restricted to only using services like iCloud Drive. You can also use things like Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, and several other cloud providers. To add one, simply visit the App Store, download the relevant app to your phone, and log in. The integration will automatically be created behind the scenes between the app and the Files app. You can use the green toggle box to enable and disable this as you like, and you can use this little tab to the right of that to drag the location in terms of where it will sit in order of priority when you're viewing your files. Directly beneath that is recently deleted, and that is exactly what it sounds like. And just to wrap up the navigation section, let me quickly show you how you would go and view some of your files, because of course, that's the main thing that you're going to be doing within the Files app. If I tap into the iCloud Drive location, you can see that I have several folders in here. I can tap the ellipsis menu in the upper right of the screen, and something that you may want to do is change the view from icons, which is how I've currently got this set up, to list. I'm going to tap into desktop, which is my iCloud desktop. If you use iCloud, this will then sync across all of your different devices. Let's take a moment to look at how we interact with files. Here I've got a PDF. So if I tap into the file, because this is a PDF, it's going to open up in a preview or quick look. You can see down at the bottom left that I have a share option. I can choose to either send a copy of the PDF or I can choose to collaborate on it, which is where I can work on a particular file with a number of other people. I have a search option where I can search for specific words within this PDF. And then I have markup down at the bottom right where I can use my finger and the various different pen and pencil options at the bottom to add any illustrations. Also at the top, you'll see the name of the file with a downward pointing arrow. The options that you have available in here are generally the same, although there will be a few subtle differences based on the type of document. So because this is a PDF, I have the option to lock it, but I can also duplicate it, move it, rename it, or print it. I also have a share option. Again, this is no different from the share option in the bottom left. It is just a different way of accessing it. If I were to repeat the exact same process on an image file, there are a couple of additional options here, like being able to save the image directly to your Photos app or being able to export it. You'll probably find that there are different options if you're opening video files, audio files, or document files. There are too many to cover in this video, but you get the idea that this changes depending on what you're looking at. So that was what happens when we tap on a file, but there is another way of interacting with files, and that's to do what's known as a long press, where you tap and hold for just a second on the file until you see this menu. Again, the options in here are going to vary depending on the type of file that you're looking at. Also, this is a visual change to iOS 18, the copy, move, and share buttons that appear at the top of this menu. These options, which people tend to look for the most, have been put into a more prominent position here. In iOS 17, these existed much further down the screen. You can remove the download for this file. The way that the Files app tends to work is it will try to intelligently manage storage on your device by only downloading the files that you need to use, and over time, as it notices that files aren't being used, it will tend to offload them. Everything in the iCloud Drive part of your device also exists in the cloud. If I were to choose Remove Download here, the file would be removed from my phone, but it would still exist in my iCloud Drive. As soon as I tap on it, it would immediately download from the cloud, allowing me to do everything that I need to do with it. In general, your device is pretty good at managing this by itself, but if you do notice from time to time that there are some large files that you don't necessarily want to delete, but you also don't want clogging up space on your phone, you could come in here and remove the download. This is completely different from delete, which is down at the bottom of this page. Delete will delete the file both here and in iCloud Drive as well. So keep that in mind. If you just want to remove the actual file from taking up space on your phone, but you still want it in the cloud, use the Remove Download button. If you want to completely delete it from both your device and from iCloud Drive, use the delete button. Quick Look is going to take us back to a preview of the file. It's essentially what we were doing when we tapped on the file itself a couple of minutes ago. Get Info will show us a wealth of information relevant to the file. You would press the Done button when you finished viewing the information, and we would then long press to get back to where we were. You can rename the file, you can duplicate the file, and you can create a new folder with this file. I'll come back to compress in just a moment, and like I said, we'll cover tags in its own section a bit later in the video. If I tap into Quick Actions, you can see that we have a couple of options here. Quick Actions are essentially shortcuts that you can run within the Files app of your device, and they'll vary depending on the kind of file that you're working with. For example, if I had several images selected and I pressed on Quick Actions, I would have the ability to convert the images to different file formats or bring a load of images together to a PDF. This example is a PDF, so the quick actions I can run are markup, which we already talked about, and the ability to optimize the file size of the PDF. This is really good if you have a PDF with a lot of images, as your device will look to drop the resolution of those images down to make the PDF much smaller. Let me show you a couple of these functions in action to show you how this would work. So I'm going to tap and hold on the file for just a moment, and I'm going to choose duplicate. You can see that we now have two versions of this file showing in this particular folder. And because it's an identical file, the naming format is the same, but with the next number added to it. So we have BookScan and we have BookScan 2. If I tap the ellipsis in the upper right corner of the screen, you'll see that there is a select option at the top. I'll tap that and then choose both of these documents. And again, we have a number of options now available to us at the bottom of the screen. We can share them like we did before. The button to the right of that is another duplicate button. So if I tap on that, it will now create a duplicate of those two files. So we now have 4 in total. Again, I'll press the ellipsis, press select, and I'll select all 4 of these files. The button in the bottom center is a move to folder button. So if I tap on that, I'm going to get the browse window to appear, and I would then search for the location where I'd like to move these files to. I'm not going to do that on this occasion. I'm going to again select the 4 files and just point out that we do have a delete button to the right of the folder button. And then we have an ellipsis button down at the bottom right. You can see that one of the new options that we have here is Create PDF button. And if I tap on that, it will take those 4 documents that we'd selected and convert them into one PDF. This can be done with PDFs, this can be done with images, this can be done with a combination of both of them. Also, just quickly, let me show you a couple of general tips. One is that the Files app works in landscape mode. All you would do is ensure that you don't have orientation lock enabled on your device and just turn your phone into landscape mode. It functions exactly the same way, so if you'd prefer to use it this way, you can. The other tip is that rather than always having to tap the ellipsis and then select to select files, you can use 2 fingers and swipe down the page of files to quickly select multiple files at the same time. You would deselect files by tapping on them, and what I'm going to do is select all of the files other than the original file that we'd selected, press the bin button at the bottom, and you can see that I've now deleted them. You can connect an external drive, like an external SSD, to your iPhone, although this is much easier on more modern iPhones like the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro. This is because those devices come with a USB-C port at the bottom, and they support power delivery via USB-C. All you need to do is take your drive, connect the USB-C cable to the SSD and the other end directly to the phone. As soon as you do this, you'll see that the drive is enabled and it will show in the Files app under the Browse section. Working with files on an external drive is the same as working with files on your iCloud drive or on the device itself. But the good thing about working with them on the iPhone or the iPad is that there's no need to eject the drive before you remove it, like you're supposed to on the Mac. You can also access external drives on iPhones that don't have USB-C, like the iPhone 14 range or older, but to do this you will need to pick up an additional accessory, a Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter, which you can buy directly from Apple. For this to work, you'll need two cables, one to provide power to the Lightning to USB 3 camera adapter itself, and the second cable to connect from the adapter to your external drive. You would then plug all of that into your iPhone 14 or older device. So the Files app lets you connect an external drive to your iPhone, but to do that, you need a really good external drive, and that's where Samsung comes in. Thanks to Samsung for sponsoring this video. Whatever your storage and memory needs are, Samsung has you covered. I've been using their SSDs for years now. Whenever I want to transfer content between my devices, I grab either my T7, T7 Touch, or T7 Shield. But Samsung just sent me their latest products to check out, the T9 and the T5 Evo. So the T9 looks like the T7 Shield, although I prefer the casing here on the T9 personally. If you're a creative that needs storage on the move, this is your drive, with read-write speeds of up to 2000 megabytes a second and compatibility with Mac, iPhone, Windows, Android, even games consoles and 12K cameras. It's drop resistant up to 3 meters for peace of mind while you're traveling, and Samsung's dynamic thermal guard minimizes performance drop from overheating. It's also seriously portable, but if you want even more portability, check out the T5 Evo, which is not only super compact, it comes with a built-in clip to allow you to attach it to your bag, your keys, or whatever. It's still fast too, with a read-write speed of up to 460 megabytes a second, and the rubberized surface means it's protected with up to 2 meters of drop resistance. If this sounds good to you, there are links in the description of this video where you can pick these up in a range of storage options, so why not go and check them out? I've already mentioned in this video that different file types will behave differently within the Files app, but let me give you a few specific examples. If I go into my iCloud drive and browse until I see the Pages folder, I can tap into this and you can see that I have several Pages files. One thing to point out, notice the cloud icon to the right with the downward pointing arrow. That signifies that this particular file currently exists only in the cloud and isn't stored locally on my phone. I can download this file from the cloud to my phone, either by tapping directly on the cloud icon or simply tapping on the file to open it. Let me show you a really important aspect when it comes to opening these types of files. If I tap on a Pages file, you'll notice that it opens as a quick look, just like the PDF did earlier. That's because on this particular phone that I'm working on, I don't have the Pages app installed. Pages files need to be opened in Pages, and as I don't have the app on this particular phone, all that my device can do is open up a quick look preview. If I then go to the App Store and download the Pages app and repeat the process, you'll see that when I tap on the file here in Files, the Pages app automatically opens and we jump from Files to Pages. I am still technically viewing a preview version of the document, but I can tap the edit button in the upper right of the screen to begin editing this particular document. When I'm finished, I would just come out of Pages, back into Files, and any changes that I make will be automatically reflected. This would be the same for other Apple apps like Keynote or Numbers. By the way, if you prefer to have content like this in a written format, there's a PDF version of this video complete with screenshots, and you can access it along with all other PDFs I've created, plus future ones, for just $5 a month, or by itself as a one-time payment. You can either scan the QR code that you can see on screen, or follow the link in the description of this video to learn more. Let's take a look at how we can work with images within the Files app, and let me also show you a really important thing to be aware of regarding images. The phone that I'm using here is a demo phone that I use specifically for these training videos. I don't tend to capture images on this phone. I tend to capture them on my main phone and then airdrop any suitable images that I want to include here on the demo phone. Because images on iPhones are typically dealt with using the Photos app, when this happens, the photo will open in the Photos app rather than Files. And if I want to get this image into Files, I have to share it. with an image open here in the Photos app, I'm going to press the Share button, scroll down and choose Save to Files. You can see that the Files window pops up, and it's the same Files window that we've been looking at throughout this video. We're currently in the Browse section, so I'm going to choose the folder where I would like to save this image, and then press the Save button in the upper right-hand corner. If I now go back to Files and browse to the folder where I just saved that image, you can see the image showing in here. If I then tap on that image, it will open as a quick look. You can see that we have some options here, but it isn't as feature-rich as the Photos app. That's because, in general, most of the things that you're going to do with images on your iPhone, you're going to do within the Photos app instead of Files. But if I tap and hold for a second on the image, you can see that there are some options here. For example, if I tap into Quick Actions, I can rotate the file left and right 90 degrees. I can create a PDF from this image or from multiple images, and I can convert the image. If I tap on that, I can change the image to either a JPEG or a PNG or a HEIF file. For all of these options, you'll also be given the choice to select between small, medium, large, or the original size of the image. Also, under Quick Actions, there should usually be a Remove Background option. This is where your phone will use machine learning to identify the subject of the image and remove the background, leaving just the subject. When you do this in the Photos app, you tap and hold on the subject, and you can then copy that subject and paste it into another app, for example. This is the same, it's just in reverse. It's going to create a second image with just the subject and all of the background removed. The success you have here will vary greatly depending on the type of image that you're using. I mentioned shared files and folders earlier in the video. It's this option down at the bottom of the screen in the middle, and this allows you to view files and folders that have been shared with you or files and folders that you've shared with someone else. Let me show you how you do that. I'll go to Browse and find a folder that I would like to share with another person. I'll tap and hold on it for just a second, and you can see that in iOS 18, the share option is at the top of the screen, whereas in iOS 17, the option is there, it's just a bit further down. I'll tap on the share button and you can see that I have two options. I can send a copy of this folder to somebody, which will send the contents of the folder to another person. I'm going to change this to Collaborate. Collaborate means that the person that I'm sending this link to will not receive a copy of the folder, rather they will be added into iCloud Drive as a collaborator within the folder. This way they can view and edit documents, add files and additional folders, and those changes will be reflected on my side as well. I'm going to message the person the collaboration request, which they'll then receive as a text. They'll have to accept it in order for us to begin collaborating on a folder, but you can see that even though I'm waiting for this person to accept my collaboration request, here in the Shared tab, the folder that we just created is showing. My wife and I made use of this when we bought a house. There were several documents that we both had to have visibility of, and we found that this was the quickest, easiest, and most secure way of sharing those documents without constantly sending them back and forth. Also, something to be aware of is that if you have a shared file or folder with someone else, like in this example where I've shared a folder with somebody, if I tap into it, you can see at the top of the screen, it says shared by me, and there is an options button. If I tap into that options button, I can share with more people or remove people that I've given share access to. I can tap into share options, and this is where I can choose who can access the files and folders, what permissions they have, whether they can make changes or only view the documents in a folder, and whether these people can add additional people themselves. I can also copy the sharing link and stop sharing by pressing the stop sharing button. Let's talk for a moment about some of the actual ways that you're going to be using the Files app, because showing you how to navigate around and all of the different functions is all well and good, but at some point you're going to want to do things with the app. For example, I've received an email, and in that email is a PDF. You'll notice that the PDF in the Mail app has a download button to the right of it. If I tap on that, you can see that there are three options: Save to Documents, Save to Downloads, or Save Attachment. If I choose Save to Documents, nothing seems to happen, but if I then go to the Files app and go to iCloud Drive, then choose Documents, you can see that the PDF that we just saved is now showing in here. So when we talk about saving to documents, we are talking about saving to iCloud Drive. If I then repeat the process, but instead choose Save to Downloads, again, we can go into iCloud Drive and the file is showing in the Downloads folder instead. So essentially the process is exactly the same, and in both instances we've ended up moving a file from Mail into iCloud, making it accessible on all of our other devices like an iPad or a Mac. We've just put them into different folders. The third option is called Save Attachment. If I tap on that, you can see that we get a Files option appear, and this is because this option allows me to choose where I'd like to store this file. If I press the browse button at the top, you can see all of my locations, including on my iPhone. So if for whatever reason I wanted to store a copy of this locally on my phone to access offline, I can do that. I would just choose where I want to store it and then press the save button in the upper right corner of the screen. Something else that you might want to do with the Files app on your phone is deal with zip files. You might need to do this either as the person creating a zip file to share with someone else, or as the person who's received a zip file and you want to open it up. Let's start with the process of creating a zip file and sharing it. Let's say that we've got a bunch of images that we want to compress into a zip file and send to someone. Now, technically, the long-winded way of doing this would be to create a folder in the Files app, then go into the Photos app, select the photos that we want to add to the folder, share them from the Photos app over to the Files app, select the files in the Files app, create a zip file, and then add that zip file to a new email and send it that way. This would work. There's nothing wrong with doing it that way, other than the fact that this is quite long-winded. A much easier way of doing this, which is accessible to everyone, is a shortcut that Apple have written themselves. To access this, you're going to need the Shortcuts app, which should already be installed on your phone, but if it isn't, go to the App Store, search for the Shortcuts app, and download it. Once you've done that, open the Shortcuts app, tap on Gallery in the bottom right corner of the screen, and in the search bar at the top, type zip. You're looking for the shortcut called zip and email, and what this does is compress files into a zip file and allow you to immediately email it to someone. Press the plus button to add this shortcut to your device. With that done, I can now go to the Photos app, select the images that I would like to send to somebody in the zip, and press the share button in the bottom left corner of the screen. If I scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that there is an option called zip and email. If I tap on that, you may get a prompt asking you to allow the zip and email shortcut to send photos in an email. You should choose always allow in this instance. You can see that an email is created with the photos in a zip file ready for me to send. I just need to change who I'm sending this to, fill in the subject, and create my email before sending it. But what if the opposite has happened? What if somebody has sent you a zip file and you need to figure out a way to uncompress that file so that you can access the files? Obviously, if this was on your Mac, you would simply save it to your downloads folder, double click on it to open the zip and access the files. It is similar here on the iPhone, but we need to use the Files app to do this. So here I've been sent a zip file in an email, and you can see that if I tap on the file itself, nothing really happens. My phone isn't capable of accessing the file within Mail. Instead, I need to tap on the save button on the right, and I can choose where I want to save this to. I'm going to save this to Downloads for this example. I'll then go back into the Files app and find the Downloads folder. I can either tap and hold on the zip and choose uncompress to uncompress it and show all of the files that are contained inside, or I can just tap on the zip file itself, and my device knows that if I do this, it means that I want to access the files within, and it will uncompress it automatically. So to finish up the video, let's circle back and cover a couple of the points that I said we would cover at the beginning, and that's the favorite section and tags. Favorites is exactly what it sounds like. This allows you to add specific folders to your favorites in order to access them more quickly. The way that you would do that is you would tap and hold on the folder for just a moment, and you can see in the contextual menu that appears there is an option called Favorite. Tap on that and the folder has been added to your favorites. You can then see that when I go into Browse under the Favorite section, the folder that I just added is visible in there. If I then decide that I no longer want this folder to be in my favorites, I have a few options for how to remove it from here. I can either swipe from right to left and you'll see a remove option appear. I can tap the ellipsis menu in the top of the screen, press edit, then press the little red circle with the white line in it and choose remove. Or I can tap and hold on the folder here in the browse menu and choose remove, and that will remove this from my favorites. The other option is tags, and the tags here work exactly like they do in any other app. These are designed to help you categorize files and help you with managing them later on. So what I could do is on a particular file, I could tap and hold for just a second, and you can see that at the bottom of the contextual menu, there is an option called tags. I'll tap into that and we have a number of options. I think by default, the tags that will show in here are color tags, and these are the ones that I think are set as standard by Apple, but you can add new tags if you like. You have the add new tag option up at the top. You can give the tag a name, and you can also assign a color if you wish. To tag something, you would simply tap on the relevant tag, and you can choose multiples if you like. You would then press done at the top of the screen, and you can see on the file itself here in the Files app, you'll have some circles that mention the specific tags that have been assigned to this file. If I then go all the way back to the Browse page, I can tap into one of the tags to see all of the files included with that particular tag. So if you're someone that deals with a lot of files and you need some kind of management system, this would be a way for you to do that. In terms of working with tags themselves, you can tap and hold on a tag for just a moment. You can either rename it or you can delete the tag altogether. So if you wanted to start from scratch, this is how you would do that. Let me show you how you would search within the Files app. So I can tap in the search bar at the top of the screen, and if I type in contract, for example, you can see that first of all, my device shows me a file and a folder that match the term contract, but just above that, I have a section that says name contains contract. If I tap that, you can see that basically I've added a search query here where I want to search for any files or folders that contain the word contract. Now in this example, I would have found the file that I'm looking for, but let's imagine for a moment that we had a lot of contract files here and we needed to be a bit more specific. What I could do is tap back into the search box and I could type blue, for example, and you can see that we have two options. I can either search for files that also contain the word blue, which is not what we want, or I can tap on the tag blue just underneath. So you can now see that my search is for files that contain the word contract in their name and have a blue tag associated with them. And for this example, there is only one file that matches that, so you can see this is a good way of searching for files. But also something else to show you in relation to search, and that's Spotlight Search, which is actually outside of the Files app. So on the home screen of your phone, you can either tap the search button at the bottom of the screen, or you can swipe down to access Spotlight Search. And if I type in contract here, for example, you can see that my phone will search all of my device, which would include the Files app and iCloud, looking for any particular files or folders that match my query. And you can see here in this example up at the top, we can access the file that we're looking for straight away from Spotlight Search without having to go and perform the search within Files. This is how I tend to use the Files app on my device. If I'm honest with you, I find it a much better search experience than the one within the Files app itself. Oh, and a couple of tips that I didn't really know where else to put in the video, but I think are still important to know. The first is view options. If I tap the ellipsis in the top right of the screen in any particular folder, you can see that there is an option called view options at the bottom. If I tap into that, you can see that I can group files together by kind, the date that they were created, their size, or who they were shared by, for example, and I can sort again by their kind, the date that they were created or edited, the size of the files and their tags. Under icon and list size, I can choose between default and compact if I want to see more files on the page, and I can also choose to show all of the file name extensions. So some files will automatically show their extensions like zip files, for example, but others like PDFs and images won't, and you might find it more useful to be able to see what kind of file you're dealing with before you tap on it, and in this case that would be something you would find helpful. Also, another feature that we haven't talked about is the undo feature. If I tap and hold on the screen for just a second, you can see that there is an undo option. So there you go, that's a thorough look at the Files app. Like I mentioned at the start, it isn't the best file management system out there, but once you know what you're doing, it is much easier to use. Do you use the Files app? If you do, how are you getting on with it? Drop me a comment and let me know. And as ever, if you found this video useful, do please consider leaving me a like and subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. See you on the next video.